Hey kids, it's Kurt Thompson and I'm back with more story time from Music History 101. It's time to get all snuggled up again. Get your hot cocoa or a little hot toddy out. Put a blanket over your feet, chill out next to the fire or the air conditioner, and here we go again. This is about someone I'm not too faintly or even remotely familiar with. I don't even remember going over this guy when I'm back in music history class. Maybe you guys do, but I picked him because I guess according to what I've been able to find out, he's the only composer of note that murdered his wife. And I thought that was a little bit bizarre, so that's why I'm bringing him up. His name is spelled Gesualdo, GESUALDO. In the general scheme of music history, Don Carlo GESUALDO is not a terribly important figure. On the other hand, he is remarkable for two reasons. He is the only famous musician to be a true-born member of the nobility, and he is the only one that we know of ever to have murdered his wife. A few other musicians have been murdered, but GESUALDO is the only one to have been a murderer himself. Okay, that's interesting. So we know some other musicians obviously were killed for whatever reason, but this guy, GESUALDO, is a killer. Besides, his music is strange. Even the right notes sound funny, wrong ones are awful. GESUALDO was born in 1560 into a family of the Italian nobility. He was a prince. How about that? He was a prince of Venosa, Count of Conza, Lord of GESUALDO, Marquis of Leno, and a whole bunch of other high-sounding things besides. His family tree went back all the way to before Charlemagne. His ancestors had a habit of either fighting a lot in wars or becoming bishops. They didn't believe in the middle ground. GESUALDO grew up in a very comfortable surroundings. There was nothing he liked better as a young man than to get together with a bunch of his friends, go away to the family castle outside Naples, and sing madrigals all night. It disturbed the neighbors, but since he was a prince, they couldn't complain. The party ended for GESUALDO in 1585. His older brother Luigi died, leaving GESUALDO heir to the family name. This meant getting married, something he wasn't keen to do. GESUALDO married his cousin, yikes, Donna Maria Davalos, who at age of 25 had married twice before already. That should have told him something. Wait a minute. We know in 2012 there's people get married and get divorced, married and divorced, the drop of a hat at a whim. But this is new to me. Back in 1585 he married a girl who had already been married twice? I didn't even think that divorce or annulments were really in existence back then. That surprised me. Anyway, the author here says that should have given him a clue. So here we go. The wedding celebration was a big bash that lasted 4 days. Everyone drank too much, and GESUALDO and his buddies sang off-key well into the small hours. The marriage went along all right for a few years. Well enough for the couple to have a baby boy anyway, but pretty soon Donna Maria began to resent the fact that GESUALDO was more interested in composing madrigals than in doing some things with her. She began spending time with a certain Fabrizio Carafa, who was a duke and a count and rather dashing. After that, they found excuses to be together most of the time, and pretty soon, people were talking. Word of the affair eventually got to GESUALDO, who changed all the locks on the palace doors. This only worked for a while. Donna Maria had the new keys made, which she gave to Carafa. So Carafa was over there boinking GESUALDO's wife when he was out composing. Now, that's not too good, is it, if you're GESUALDO? Finally, one day in October, GESUALDO told his wife he was going out hunting and made a big show of riding off to the country. He had told her not to expect him home that night. She knew a good chance when she saw him and invited Carafa to come over. She said she needed a big, strong man to open jam jars or something like that. That night, GESUALDO returned secretly to the palace and caught his wife in bed with her lover. Yikes. He shot them both and then stabbed them a few times for good measure. Historian Cecil Gray agrees with the English essayist Thomas de Quincey that murder should be considered an art form. Gray gives GESUALDO points for the pistols and swordplay, but says he should have hit her a few times with a club. A few judicious blows with a bludgeon, he says, impart a variety, expressiveness, and rich charm. After the murder, GESUALDO worried that people might be angry at him, his wife's family, for example. So he escaped to his family castle and cut down all the trees so no one could sneak up on him. GESUALDO had good cause for concern. The murdered duke had a nephew who had once hit a monk over the head and killed him just for reciting a poem too loudly. Not only did GESUALDO kill his wife and her lover, he also killed their small baby. The boy was his wife's second child. GESUALDO noticed that the baby's face looked familiar, but it didn't look like him. In a fit of anger, GESUALDO put the baby in a cradle, suspended on ropes from the ceiling, and rocked it to death. Yikes, he's kind of a brutal dude, wasn't he? And it says here Carafa was wearing his wife's nightgown at the time. That's bizarre. Huh. Something about Carafa's wife, too. It says here Carafa's wife was a religious fanatic and was inclined to shout in her sleep, and it kept him awake at night. Needless to say, the murders were too much for gossip. All the poets wrote about the event, but they tended to side with GESUALDO's wife, not him. They said he overreacted. GESUALDO married again a few years later. His second wife was Donna Eleonora d'Este, and she outlived him. But their marriage wasn't exactly rosy. GESUALDO may not have known it, but she was probably having an affair with Cardinal Alessandro d'Este, who, aside from being a man of the church, was her half-brother. Oh, these people back then, man. Might as well get hung for a sheep as a lamb, she must have figured. After his second marriage, GESUALDO spent most of his time at the court of the Duke of Ferrara, who liked to have musicians and composers hanging around the place. Over the years, he had had such famous composers as Josquin des Prez, Orlando di Lasso, Cipriano de Roy, Albrecht Mariazzano, and others. Palestrina stayed there for a few years, and even John Dallin dropped in once for a visit. And can you tell that my first language is not Spanish or Italian? And maybe you've picked that up by now. That's the way it goes. GESUALDO had published his first book of madrigals under the pseudonym of Giuseppe Pilonage. But now he began to publish interesting. Oh, one other side note. I guess he felt guilty about killing his wife, and it said afterwards he felt guilty about the whole thing and had a monastery built on the site to make him feel better about it. Okay. So after, I guess for a while he was penning some of these compositions under a pseudonym. Then he got back to his own name. Maybe being an infamous murderer improved his sales. And it says here, I guess there's a notation in history that the bulk of his compositions came after the murders. He says music was a more satisfying creative outlet. Composer Igor Stravinsky called GESUALDO the crank of chromaticism. Interesting. Although GESUALDO published 6 books of madrigals, almost all of them characterized by daring and unusual harmonic progressions. Maybe GESUALDO's peculiar harmonies had something to do with his chronic bowel troubles. According to one Don Ferrante della Mara, writing in 1632, GESUALDO was unable to defecate unless 10 or 12 men, whom he kept specially for the purpose, were to beat him violently 3 times a day, during which operation he was wont to smile joyfully. That probably explains everything. That's weird. GESUALDO, the murderer, had trouble going to the bathroom and taking a dump, so he had 10 or 12 men that were on his payroll that were just supposed to knock him around the ceiling until he took a crap. So anyway, it's interesting to learn about GESUALDO. He was, you might even want to Google his name. I'm going to Google his name after this. He sounded like he was in bizarro world, folks. I mean, anyway, I'm going to Google him and find out even more information and see what, I don't even remember going over him in the Real Music History 101. I'll check on him a little bit later. So that's why I love this book. Find out all kinds of queer and interesting facts about some of these masters. And we will get to the masters like Bach and Beethoven. Very interesting about these guys. So there you go, kids. It's time to wake up now. Stretch, 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 stretch. There we go. And get up. Maybe go use the facilities. Go grab you a drink of water. And go back to sleep. Until next time, I'm Kurt Thompson. And this has been Story Time in Music History 101.